Okay, so we'll come back to finish the code in just a moment. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to drag this so that I can split the screen, or maybe not split the screen, but take this into two different pages. So that way I can just simply use my four-finger swipe from the Unity to the Visual Studio community for the coding. Let's go back from here. So what I'm going to do is, or we'll get back to this, I should say. So I'm going to go back to Unity, or I could just simply use my four-finger swap for those of you on a Macintosh. And specifically, I'm not finished with the player, and I'm also not finished with the directional light. So let's say that I'm not happy, for whatever reason, with the shadow that is being cast by this directional light. Well, one of the things that I can do is I can change that value. So, for example, if I were to hover on top of the rotation, specifically for the y-axis, and if I were to change that, so I'm just simply moving to the left or drag it to the right, you can see what that effect looks like in terms of the light. So let's say that I double click over here and I type in the number 60, for example. And let's say that that's what I'm happy with. Right now, what makes 60 correct? Nothing. Let's just say that that's the value that I choose. You could choose whatever value you want in terms of what you want the light to look like and the kind of shadow that it displays. Okay, now in terms of the player, see, what I want to happen is I want this sphere to have the effect of gravity, so that it's pulling down on the surface. If I move it to the left or if I move it to the right, again, it's going to have inertial forces that are going to be having an effect on this. So what I'll want to do is, first of all, make sure that the player is selected. With the player selected, as you can see here on the screen, in the inspector, you'll go down over here to where it says Add Component. If you click on Add Component, you'll notice that if you scroll down a little bit, so I want to go over here to Physics. Now within Physics, let me tap on that, you'll look for the rigid body. So the rigid body means that we are going to be changing this player into a rigid body such that physics is applied to this particular object. So click on rigid body, and then if I scroll down, you'll see some additional controls over here on the bottom side of the inspector. Okay, at this point, let's go ahead and modify the code now such that if the user presses the left, right, up, or down arrow, that it will have an effect on our player, namely the sphere. So you can either double click on the player controller. For me, I'm just going to use the four-finger swipe to scroll over here, or to switch over here to the Visual Studio Community IDE. And what I'm going to do, the first thing is over here at the very top. So underneath where it says Public Class Player Controller Script, you can see I've entered a couple of times. My cursor is blinking right here. By the way, that font size is kind of small. On my Macintosh, I'm holding down the Alt Option button, and I'm scrolling on my touchpad here up and down so I can increase the font size. And so we're zooming in a little bit. I think that's going to be easier for you to see what I'm typing. Now, I may wrap a little bit, but that's okay. Word wrap, that is. Okay, first thing I want you to do is to type in the word private. You're going to type in capital R-I, rigid body. There it is. Microsoft's IntelliSense has shown me what that is, so I'm just going to simply hit Tab because that's what I want, a rigid body item, and I want to call that our RB, that's the object name, semicolon. Let me type in the following comments. I'm going to say this creates a variable to hold the reference. Okay, what does that mean? Well, what we're talking about here is I need to somehow refer to this player. So how will I refer to that sphere in code? Well, the way that I'm going to refer to that sphere is through this guy right here, RB. So what is this guy? Well, it's a player object, and since I have created a rigid body from that add component that I did before where I clicked physics and then rigid body, so it's this rigid body part of this player that I want to refer to, because it's that rigid body that I can actually apply physics forces and move it to the left and move it to the right, and I can have gravity affect it. Okay, So that's what I'm going to be referring to. That's why that word reference is there. I'm going to be referring to this guy here whenever I use RB. So that's an abbreviation for rigid body. All right, let me get rid of this extra space here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to get or make that association or that reference to that rigid body. So what I'll type over here in the start function is RB, and then I'm going to type in get component. And in fact, I don't even have to finish typing it. Get component appears right here. Let me just go ahead and press tab. Let me use the angled brackets, and I'm going to type in rigid body. I don't have to finish typing. It appears right here, so I can just press tab. And then let me just go outside of it, open and close parentheses, and then I'm going to put a semicolon outside of that. So what happens here is at the very beginning of the program, that's when the start function is called. At the very beginning, I want you to get the component that's associated with this script, that rigid body specifically, and I want you to assign it, or I want you to make a reference to it, to RB. What is RB? RB is a rigid body. So in layman's speak, here's what we're doing. When I start the program, get the rigid body. Oh, okay, well the rigid body that's associated with the script is this guy right here, the player. Right? This player has a script. This script belongs to this player. So when I say get your rigid body, well, what is your rigid body? Well, it's the player. So we're going to get that player, and we're going to make a reference to it called RB. So when I'm doing things to RB, I'm really doing things to the player, because that's why I'm creating this reference. All right. Now, one of the things that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to use the up, down, left, right arrows. And so what I'll do is instead of using the update function, there is another function called fixed update. So the fixed update function, let's see here, hold on for a second here. All right, the fixed update function is called just before any physics calculations. And the way that you create it is you type in void, type in fixed. In fact, here it is. It comes up in Microsoft's IntelliSense, so I can just simply double click it, and there it is. It puts the word private in front of there for me. All right, so what the fixed update function does is it's going to be called just before any physics calculations. So as opposed to updating once every frame, let's perform the physics calculation and then update the screen. Well, in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to have you do is we're going to create two variables, and these two lines grab the input for your player through the keyboard. Now, by the way, I'm going to wing this here. I don't like this, how it goes off the screen. I'd rather that it word wrap. Let's see here. I think let's see if I can do a quick search for word wrap. No? Let's see here. Tools. No. Build. No. Version control. Run. No. There's got to be a way for me to change that. I haven't used Visual Studio for Macintosh before, but in the Windows version, one of the things I can do is to make it so that there's a word wrapping. And so I want to see if I can do that here. I wanted to just check really quick. Let's see here, editor, and it's got to be somewhere in here. Okay, I'll find out later on, then I'll show you how to do it. But I just don't like it when the text goes off screen. But anyway, I'm being picky. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to create a float. And I'm going to call it move horizontal. Now, how do I get the arrows that are going to be moving to the left and to the right? Well, you can type in input dot get axis. There it is. I'll just simply double click on that. And what I want to do is I want to refer specifically to the left and to the right arrow. Or you can just simply type in horizontal. Now, notice that I'm being very careful with my spelling, capital H, typing horizontal. Let me put a semicolon at the very end. What this does is it says get, anytime that you press either the left or the right arrow, I want you to get that, and that value is going to be assigned to a variable called move horizontal. Well, I'm going to do the same thing over here for move vertical, which means we're going to move it up and down the screen, so vertical. And once again, we'll use input.getAccess, but this time, yep, you guessed it, within quotation marks, we're going to type in vertical, and then don't forget to put your semicolon at the very end. Okay, so get the left and right arrow presses, get the up and down arrow presses on your keyboard, and we're going to assign those presses, specifically those values, to move horizontal and move vertical. Now what I need to do is I need to grab that because I intend on applying a force to the sphere based on the user pressing left, down, up, and right. So what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a vector 3, and if you don't understand what a vector 3 is, don't worry about it, that's fine. You're basically just mimicking what I'm doing right now, and then as time goes on, this will make more sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a vector 3. Now a vector 3 is nothing more than a three-dimensional vector. What is a vector? Well, in physics, we say that vectors have a direction and a magnitude. So a vector is an arrow. And in this case, this is an arrow that is pointing somewhere in 3D space. I want to capture that arrow that is pointing in a certain direction. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to say vector 3D movement. We're going to assign that. I'll use the new keyword because this is coming from this class. We're going to create this object, vector 3, and now I need to type in the X, Y, and Z axis components. So here I see the three different flavors that I can use. Notice this, it creates a new vector with given X, Y, and Z components. Yep, that's the one that I want. I don't have to do this, by the way. I don't have to click on this. This is like, you know, like a quick cheat sheet to show me here's the different way that, or the different ways that you can use a vector 3. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to apply to this an X, Y, and Z axis. Now, we have an X axis, that's going to be the move horizontal. We have the Z axis, that's going to be move vertical, but we're not going to apply a Y axis because that's moving up and down the screen, and we don't want this ball moving up and down like this. We just want it moving left and right and up, and then forward and backward, I should say. So let me just go ahead and say undo move so that it restores this back to where it was before. Okay, well the x-axis component, that's simply my move horizontal, which is what I declared over here. For the y-axis, we're going to say 0.0f, which means that this basically stays on the y-axis. So over here you'll notice that the position for the y-axis right here, well, this is currently staying at 0.5. But what I'm saying here is you're not going to move this up and down. We're going to leave this as is. We're going to leave it as is at 0.5. And so this is, in other words, not going to move it up and down. And then in terms of moving it forward and backward, which we're calling move vertical, we're going to simply say move. Let me move the up arrow over here, vertical, just like that. Don't forget to put at the very end your semicolon. So that's what the code should look like. Okay, and then after that, now that I have this movement vector 3D, I need to add that force to my rigid body. So the way that I'll do that is I'll type in RB dot add force. And what does it want? Well, it wants some sort of a force vector. So let's see, it adds a force to the rigid body. Well, I have that. I've already created movement, which is a vector 3 item. And that's what I'm going to be using as my force vector. So I can just simply type in the word movement. It's this guy over here. Let me just simply press tab, and then I'll enter a semicolon. And then as you can see over here, we're done with the code. Okay, so the first thing I had better do is I'd better save my work. So let me go ahead and save that. And we're done with the coding part. Double check to make sure that you have your semicolons. Very important that all your statements are terminated by semicolons. Make sure that you have the open and close curly braces. In the start function, you are using this right here. That's your line of code. And then before the start code, but afterwards is public class, you have this private rigid body variable that you're creating called RB, which is your rigid body. Okay, so now let me go back over here and let's run the game. Let's see what happens here. Now, first of all, you'll notice that if I press the game tab, this is what it's going to look like when I run the game. This is what it looks like. The scene view is like your design view. You're moving the camera, or not the camera, but you're moving your reference, how you're looking at this game, to the left, to the right, up and down. You're rotating, clockwise, counterclockwise. You want to see what this thing looks like from different perspectives as you design it. But this is what it's going to look like when you are in game mode, or when you are in the running mode. So what we'll do is we'll locate this guy over here. It looks like a VCR play button. I'm going to click on this guy. And now, by the way, my screen turns orange. This is just something that I set up so that it basically tells me, hey, by the way, just to remind you, you are in run mode. I forgot how to set that. I'll have to find out how I set that up. One of the students helped me out with this. I'll find out how to do that. This is just simply something in run mode. If I take this off, you can see that that orange screen goes away. So probably when you click this, you're not going to have this orange outline. You're just simply going to see that you're in game mode. Now, let me press the right arrow, and beautiful. I'm just holding it down. I'm pressing it, and it falls off the platform. Nice. Okay, so let me stop and start it again. And now let me press the left button. I'm holding the left button down, and you see it's getting faster and faster because I'm applying a force to it. And it goes off the screen. Okay, let me start and stop this game mode again. And now I'm going to push the down arrow so the ball is coming towards me faster and faster and faster because I'm applying a force, and then finally it's off screen. Let me do this one more time, and I'm going to push the up arrow on my keyboard, and you'll see that this thing eventually is going to go off the top end of the platform, and there it goes. Okay, so that's great. We are applying a force to the sphere, and you saw it moving to the left, right, up, and down, or forward and backward. Now, let's see what happens. I'm going to run the game once again, and I'm going to push the down arrow, and then I'm going to lift up off the down arrow, and I'm now going to push on the up arrow and slow this down and reverse its direction. Now I'm going to tap, 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 tap the bottom arrow to see if I can get that to stop. So you see the effect. I want you to experiment with this. Tap, tap, tap the right arrow, and you'll see the effect. I'm just tapping right now. Tap, tap, tap. And now I'm going to hold down the left, and now I'm going to tap, 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 down, and then I'm going to try to keep this on screen. Now I'm not going to tap. I'm just simply going to touch these arrows. In fact, I have the top and the left pressed right now. Now I have the left and the bottom arrow. And now I have the bottom and the right arrow. And I'm just trying to keep this on screen, playing around with this, and I let it go. Okay. So, good news, your code works. You are able now to apply physics forces to the sphere, and so now we're ready for the next component.